For more than 50 years, one man remained closer to Bruce Lee than almost anyone else in the world. While millions admired Bruce from afar, Dan Inosanto trained beside him every day. He watched him struggle, experiment, fail, improve, and rebuild himself again and again. Inosanto was not just a student. He was a training partner, a confidant, and a witness to Bruce Lee's private journey. He saw what cameras never captured and what books rarely explained. Yet for decades, he chose silence. He did not rush to interviews. He did not write sensational memoirs. He did not compete for attention. Instead, he quietly carried memories that could have changed how the world saw Bruce Lee. When he finally decided to speak, it was not to glorify a legend. It was to reveal the truth behind it. And that truth, for many fans, was uncomfortable. It did not strengthen the myth. It humanized it. And for some, that felt like betrayal. After Bruce Lee's sudden death in 1973, the world rushed to turn him into something larger than life. Movies, magazines, books, and documentaries began shaping his image. Slowly, Bruce Lee stopped being remembered as a man and started being treated like a flawless symbol. He became an untouchable figure, a perfect fighter, a master of every art, a warrior without weakness. Over time, these stories grew stronger than reality. Dan Inosanto watched this transformation quietly. He saw how real memories were replaced by exaggerated narratives, yet he remained silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because he believed some things deserved protection. Bruce Lee's life, in his view, was not entertainment. It was personal. It was sacred. Speaking carelessly could reduce it to gossip. For Inosanto, loyalty meant restraint, and for more than 40 years he honored that silence. During those decades, Bruce Lee's reputation expanded far beyond martial arts. He became a cultural icon, a symbol of discipline, strength, and self-mastery. Fans defended his image fiercely. Online debates turned emotional. Any suggestion that Bruce had limitations was attacked. Questioning his perfection was treated like disrespect. Inosanto observed these reactions with concern. He understood where they came from. For many people, Bruce Lee represented hope and inspiration. Admitting that he was still learning felt like losing something important, but Inosanto knew the truth. He had seen Bruce struggle with techniques. He had watched him doubt his own ideas. He had listened to him question everything. To Inosanto, these traits were not weaknesses. They were signs of greatness. But the public preferred simple stories, and simple stories rarely include uncertainty. As years passed, a new generation discovered Bruce Lee through social media, movies, and short clips. Most of them never read his writings. They never studied his philosophy deeply. Instead, they inherited exaggerated versions of his story. Inosanto began to worry. Silence, he realized, was no longer protecting Bruce's legacy. It was allowing others to reshape it. Misinformation spread easily. False quotes circulated. Fiction was treated as fact. Bruce Lee's ideas were simplified into slogans. His complexity was disappearing. Inosanto felt a growing responsibility. If he remained quiet, future generations might never understand who Bruce really was. Not a perfect hero, but a relentless learner. Not a finished product, but a work in progress. And that truth, he believed, mattered more than comfort. The moment that finally pushed Dan Inosanto to speak did not come from an interview or a rumor. It came from a movie theater. In 2019, he watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a film that portrayed Bruce Lee in a way that shocked him. On screen, Bruce appeared arrogant, dismissive, and boastful. He spoke carelessly about other fighters and acted as if he were invincible. To many viewers, it was just fiction. To Inosanto, it was painful. It was not the man he knew. Bruce Lee, in reality, respected other athletes deeply. He studied them. He learned from them. He admired Muhammad Ali. He admired boxers, wrestlers, and martial artists from many backgrounds. Seeing him reduced to a caricature felt wrong. For the first time in decades, Inosanto realized that silence was no longer an option. After the film's release, Dan Inosanto carefully chose his words. He did not attack the filmmakers. He did not create controversy for attention. Instead, he spoke calmly and honestly. He explained that Bruce Lee was confident but never disrespectful. Confidence, for Bruce, came from preparation and self-knowledge, not from humiliating others. Inosanto reminded people that Bruce admired Muhammad Ali and often studied his fights for rhythm and movement. The idea that Bruce would mock Ali was unrealistic. What disturbed Inosanto most was not just the dialogue, but the message behind it. The scene suggested that Bruce's confidence was empty and needed to be humbled. That contradicted everything Inosanto had witnessed. Bruce constantly tested himself. He never believed he was beyond improvement. The film, in his view, replaced complexity with convenience. Inosanto was not alone in his concerns. Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, also expressed disappointment. She explained that the family had never been consulted about the portrayal. For her, the issue was not pride. It was accuracy. Watching her father's character be simplified into a stereotype was painful. Inosanto supported her position. He emphasized that this was not about protecting an ego. It was about protecting history. When fictional portrayals become more popular than real accounts, they begin to define memory. Over time, audiences forget what is true and remember only what is entertaining. Inosanto feared that Bruce Lee's life was being rewritten by people who never knew him. And once that happens, restoring truth becomes almost impossible. Speaking out came at a personal cost. For decades, Inosanto had avoided public controversy. He valued peace and privacy. But once he broke his silence, criticism followed. Some fans accused him of damaging Bruce Lee's image. Others claimed he was exaggerating. A few even suggested he was jealous or seeking attention. These accusations hurt deeply. Inosanto had spent most of his life honoring Bruce quietly. He had never tried to place himself above his teacher. Yet now, honesty was being interpreted as betrayal. Still, he refused to retreat. He believed that loyalty meant telling the truth, even when the truth was unpopular. Protecting a friend's legacy did not mean protecting illusions. One of the most controversial topics Inosanto addressed was Bruce Lee's early training in Wing Chun. Many fans believed Bruce had mastered the system completely and reached the highest level. Inosanto explained that this was not accurate. Bruce left Hong Kong before completing the entire formal curriculum. He was talented and dedicated, but he did not finish every stage. For some fans, this statement felt shocking. They interpreted it as an attempt to lower Bruce's status. But Inosanto never intended it that way. He was simply explaining history. He emphasized that Bruce never cared about ranks, certificates, or titles. What mattered to him was effectiveness. If something worked, he kept it. If it did not, he moved on. To help people understand, Inosanto used a simple analogy. A person does not need a doctorate to think like a scholar. In the same way, Bruce Lee did not need formal completion to understand deeply. He absorbed Wing Chun's principles, timing, sensitivity, and efficiency. Then he transformed them. He combined them with boxing, fencing, and other systems. His goal was not to preserve tradition. It was to create something functional. This approach confused many observers. They expected loyalty to one style. Bruce chose loyalty to reality. Inosanto explained that this flexibility was Bruce's true genius. But for fans who preferred clear labels and simple hierarchies, this explanation felt unsettling. When Bruce Lee passed away suddenly in 1973, the shock was felt around the world. He was only 32 years old and at the height of his creative power. Films were unfinished. Training systems were still evolving. Personal notebooks were filled with unanswered questions. For Dan Inosanto, the loss was devastating. This was not the death of a celebrity. It was the loss of a close friend and mentor. Inosanto served as a pallbearer at Bruce's funeral, standing beside his family as he was laid to rest. In later interviews, he admitted that he struggled for years to understand how someone so energetic and driven could disappear so quickly. The sudden absence left a permanent emptiness in his life. Time passed, but Inosanto's grief never fully faded. Even decades later, he confessed that he thought about Bruce Lee every single day. Sometimes once, sometimes many times. These thoughts were not about fame or nostalgia. They were about lessons, conversations, and shared experiences. Bruce remained present in his teaching, his training, and his philosophy. After the funeral, Inosanto made a life-changing decision. He left his job as a physical education teacher and dedicated himself completely to martial arts instruction. This choice was not about building a brand. It was about preserving a mindset. He felt responsible for continuing Bruce's unfinished work. As years passed, Inosanto watched misinformation spread. Some individuals claimed authority they never earned. Others sold simplified versions of Bruce Lee's philosophy for profit. Jeet Kune Do, which was meant to be flexible and evolving, became rigid in many places. It turned into a label rather than a process. This troubled Inosanto deeply. He never claimed to replace Bruce. He openly admitted that he did not possess Bruce's natural speed or explosive power. What he had was proximity. He had seen Bruce's intentions firsthand. He understood where his thinking was heading. Preserving that direction became his lifelong mission. Criticism never stopped. Some fans accused Inosanto of watering down Bruce Lee's legacy. Others claimed he was changing Jeet Kune Do for personal benefit. But these arguments ignored Bruce's own teachings. Bruce warned against stagnation. He believed that anything that stopped evolving would decay. Inosanto repeatedly reminded students that freezing Bruce Lee in one era contradicted everything he stood for. Jeet Kune Do was never meant to be preserved like a museum exhibit. It was meant to adapt to new environments, new bodies, and new challenges. For Inosanto, protecting Bruce's legacy meant allowing it to breathe. In the end, the controversy surrounding Dan Inosanto was never really about facts. It was about fear. Many fans were afraid that admitting complexity would weaken their hero. They wanted certainty, perfection, and final answers. Inosanto offered something different. He offered honesty. He showed that Bruce Lee was exceptional not because he was flawless, but because he never stopped questioning himself. He was still learning, still experimenting, still unfinished. That humanity was his true strength. By speaking openly, Inosanto did not betray his friend. He honored him. He protected Bruce Lee from becoming a frozen myth. He preserved him as a living example of growth, curiosity, and courage.